Hey guys, I'm Kate, and I'm scared of my little sister. And that's because she's not normal, but my parents still see her as their little son. I must say, my story is quite tough, and if you're looking for something to laugh at, you better switch the video immediately. As for others, take popcorn and prepare for the fact that your worst nightmares will acquire a specific sign of sanity. It all started with rabbits. Our parents have their own farm, and the rabbit cages are located at the very end of the site, almost close to the forest. Not because there's any sacred meaning in this. There was just no other place for them. They had other animals: chickens, pigs, and sheep. Of course, there are some wild animals in the woods. But anyway, there's a big fence between our farm and the woods. Our animals have never suffered from wild animal raids, except a couple of chickens that were dragged away by a fox. But these chickens somehow got outside the fence on their own, and the rabbits suddenly started dying. But it was obvious they were strangled. Their necks were broken in a typical way. Any farmer could see it with a naked eye, but the beast can't open the cage, right? Even if it's a very wild and very hungry animal. Only 4 people lived on our farm all the time: Dad, Mom, my sister, and me. I was 16 at the time of the rabbit's extinction, and Vicky was younger, 13. Other people showed up too, but they were just our workers, and it was stupid to blame them for this. On the contrary, the more animals we had, the more work they had, and that meant their salary would go up. Dad and Mom wouldn't do it either, just left my sister and me. But who would think of the kids? I would. I mean, crap. I've been thinking all the time since our cat had gone missing. She was still a kitten, small and fluffy. And as for the story with the rabbits, I didn't even doubt that all the problems came from Vicky, as she only pretended to be warm and fuzzy. In fact, from the outside, we seemed like a perfect, very close family. I was considered a smart and responsible girl. Everyone said that I would definitely go far and achieve a lot in my life. Vicky was just a real angel. I looked like my dad. He was a short, stocky man with coarse black hair. But my sister received a generous supply of blonde angel curls, huge blue eyes, and simply stunning naivete in her gaze from my mom. By the way, she knew from her childhood how to manipulate people by biting her lips and pouring tears in her beautiful eyes. So she used that to the fullest. Sometimes she didn't even have to ask for anything. Everyone brought her everything themselves. And besides, they also even said thank you to her for taking their gifts. I was the only one not to buy her angel appearance, and perhaps I only made it worse for myself. They say that all the kids are jealous of their parents. If there are more than 2 kids in the family, there would be fights, conflicts, or something else which is not very pleasant. At least, just yelling at each other. You know, it's a holy attribute, but it was completely different with us, because Vicky was a sociopath. Of course, I didn't know anything about sociopaths before. I just felt that I couldn't trust my sister's smiles. There was something in her eyes that was, abnormal, you know? She smiled like a doll or a mad scientist, both empty and dissecting. But I didn't have these definitions in my little head at that time either. I was just feeling afraid of her. We never quarreled. Almost. Anyway, we didn't get into any conflicts. And that's because once, when I was only 10 or so, Vicky took my doll without asking, and I was indignant. I didn't feel sorry for the doll, just for the fact that someone took my things without asking, which was not very pleasant for me. Vicky gave me the toy back without any problems. She even apologized. And the next day, when I returned from school and reached into the toy box with the dolls, I found that it was empty. Not a single toy. Not a single doll anywhere in my room. Of course, I immediately rushed to my mom, and she thought I threw everything out on purpose. Despite my protests and cries, I was punished. Then, a couple of months later, I dumped something into a big compost pit in the backyard. The pit gurgled at me, and in the depths of the air bubble, I saw the parts of my doll, the one I had taken back from Vicky. I didn't even disdain to get it out of there to show my mom. And then I cried and screamed for a long time. The toy wasn't just thrown away. Someone previously broke off all her legs and arms, tore out her hair, and poked out her eyes with something sharp. and this was really as creepy as possible. But most importantly, I immediately realized who exactly did all this. It was my little sister. Despite my age, the warning reached me. We haven't had a fight since. I was just afraid I wouldn't wake up one day, and there were quite a lot of such cases. Angel-looking Vicky sometimes created such a cruel game that it was just scary to be next to her. For example, she could push a kid on the playground, but not just slightly into the sand. She did so from a great height instead, knowing for sure that he would be injured. At the same time, no one ever blamed her for such incidents. On the contrary, they rushed to calm her down even more actively than the victims. My parents also took her side all the time. They rarely listened to me, and only when they accepted I was right, they didn't punish me. But then, Vicky took revenge. One such revenge left me with a double scar on my arm and a metal spoke in my right leg. So, I never complained. Now, rabbits. I could tell exactly who was responsible for their deaths. I saw Vicky coming out of her room at night. I saw the mud on her shoes. But I couldn't prove it. In fact, I just lived quietly, trying not to stand out. I counted the days until I could go to college and move away from my family. But there was still a year to go before this happy time, and I somehow should live it. I admit, I was just afraid of her. It was a real horror. I put a metal lock on the door of my room. I had a total unwillingness to stay alone with her. For some reason, it seemed to me this demon with angel eyes would sooner or later send me to the rabbits. And at my funeral, she would sob with the most innocent and sorrowful look. The only thing I didn't understand was why everyone believed her. Why did no one, not even our local priest, who was supposed to figure out people and their sins, smiled at her and always brought her candy when he stopped by our farm? She either used some kind of hypnosis or it happened when I almost moved out. To be exact, I had already passed the final exams at school, and the college sent me a notification that I was accepted. But 1 month still remained until the classes at college started. I lived almost on suitcases, and I spent all my free time in my room, locked on a large barn lock. For the family, officially, I was preparing for my future classes. But in fact, everything was much worse. Vicky crossed the line. I had no evidence except my intuition, but recently, a boy was missing in our town. Just got lost. One day he's there, the next he's gone. Recently, this guy celebrated his 16th birthday. He had been trying to date my sister for some time. Nothing like that. She was only 14. But they proudly called that a relationship. The day he went missing, they had a big fight. It was the first time I'd actually seen Vicky behaving like this. If it's possible to describe her behavior in normal words, I would say she was angry. And then, just the next morning, his parents contacted the police and all the neighbors. Their son was missing. I repeat, I had nothing but my intuition. As with those rabbits, but something inside me told me she had recently switched from rabbits to humans, and she didn't regret it at all. Out of my inertia, I went to the safest corner of the house, and I wasn't going to share my suspicions with anyone. But it turned out that there was another observant person in my family. I don't know how or why my dad came to such conclusions, but after his conversation with the police, Vicky was taken somewhere. It would seem that it's time for me to start rejoicing, but only one thought was beating in my head. No, 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 no. Have you ever woken up from a fire when the smoke in the lungs really stops you from taking a breath, and the floor is so hot that your slippers stick and melt? But I had such a chance. Just imagine. The fire started in my parents' room. That day, Mom somehow fell asleep in the living room, watching TV and hearing nothing. And our bedrooms were in another wing of the house, so we wouldn't have been able to help. Dad didn't survive. He suffocated before rescuers and firefighters called by the neighbors appeared. This was the last straw. I immediately packed up all the things that weren't damaged in the fire and just ran off to college. Maybe my mom needed my help, but I just couldn't stay. I was so afraid for my life. It was a primal fear. I have been doing well since. I'm studying. I try not to think of my family, and I only give short answers to all the questions. I just don't want to think about that nightmare myself. I have big plans for my life ahead of me. The only things left for my family were nightmares and the occasional cough. My lungs were slightly damaged in the fire. The doctor said it would be forever from now on. But Vicky seems not to let me go. No, she doesn't call me or show up. But recently, I found a note on my pillow in my room saying, "You're good at keeping quiet." Anyway, one would assume this was someone's joke. But I know my sister's handwriting very well. And if she suddenly watches this video, I would remain silent. Someone may write this isn't a real story because all the names are fictitious. Perhaps the story itself is made up from beginning to end. But hey, you can't prove anything. And I really needed to share this lifelong nightmare. So I'm sorry if something goes wrong. Write in the comments if you've ever encountered psychopaths or sociopaths. How did you get out of the trap? It would be very interesting to study other people's stories, preferably with a happy ending. And if you ever get in the way of a girl with an angel appearance and a demon inside, just run.